So the reason I chose street photography as the topic for this um, Mentee webinar was because I think a lot of photographers have a love-hate relationship with street photography. Either you're really into it or you're not. You either think you're a street photographer or you think you're completely not a street photographer. So what I really wanted to do with this conversation was to try to, you know, help bring some of you who might feel that you're not street photographers onto the other side. And also for those who are pretty good shooting on the street, just to try to maybe hopefully give you a few more extra tips and different ideas about how to improve your street photography and hopefully, elevate your street photography from where it is at the moment. So that's the motivation behind choosing street photography as a topic. And I think that actually there are a lot of things that you can take from street photography into other types of photography as well. So even if you don't consider yourself strictly a street photographer, I still think there are lots of things that you can learn from this particular style of photography to help you improve, whatever style of images that you do. So I'm just going to cover 5 very quick points in this little introduction. These are the 5 key messages that I kind of want to get across today. So let's just go through them. Number 1, you need to think about yourself as a professional people watcher. Number 2, you need to think more about playing with your compositions or creative effects. Number 3, looking for natural, unique, and quirky moments. That's often something that you'll see in street photography, is that street photographers have this ability to be able to capture all of these unpredictable moments that are unscripted almost moments of life, which is a real skill and talent. Number 4, remembering to play with light. I mean, I talk to all of you about light so much and how important it is to think about it and incorporate it into your photographs. And street photography is exactly the same. And then number 5 is to pay attention to your surroundings. So looking at all the different elements within your frame, the background, foreground, the middle ground, and how those all play together to make the street photograph. Okay, so the first one is about becoming this professional people watcher. And I like to think a lot of professional photographers are professional people watchers, because what do I mean by that? I mean by professional people watchers, you're paying really, really close attention to how people move, how people interact with one another, and how people behave with each other within these public spaces. So street photography is traditionally done in public spaces, literally out on the street, but also maybe in parks, and you even think about any outdoor space where people are freely moving around. This is kind of what we loosely classify as a street. But you're looking at trying to almost read the situation. You're out walking around and you're looking at how people are moving. You're looking at how people are interacting. And you're trying to predict in those moments when you're looking where people might be within the frame and how they might interact with the lighting conditions that you find yourself in. And you're thinking about the background, maybe a building in the background. How can you position yourself in a place that you could capture something that hasn't even happened yet? And with street photography, you're kind of trying to predict what will happen before it actually happens. And that's part of this kind of concept of being a professional people watcher. You're trying to predict some of these things that will happen before they even occur. So that's one of the key skills to try to develop when you're trying to improve your street photography. The next one is about, like I mentioned before, thinking about all the different elements within your frame, from the foreground to the middle ground and to the background, and thinking about how you can play with those elements and how you can play with your subjects in your frame to make interesting images. Like in these two images that you see on screen now, the top one was taken in a city called Chongqing in China. And I was literally just walking around the streets of Chongqing looking for these interesting moments. And I saw this chap selling these beautiful flutes, and I saw him eating his lunch. So I kind of just casually walked up to this barrier, pretended I was taking a picture of the scenery, and then just waited for him to just take a slurp from his bowl. And at that moment, I kind of turned to my side, again, pretending to take a nice cityscape shot, and then took that photo. So I managed to get that quirky little moment of him eating with all these beautiful flutes around him, but also placing him off to the right and then giving a little bit of context. So I was thinking not just about the subject, the main subject, but also what's happening around the subject. So always thinking about the composition and the different elements. And, again, you're doing this in a fraction of a second. You're not even thinking about it. Sometimes you just even react. I'm not thinking, I must use the rule of thirds here, or I must use leading lines here. You're just reacting in the moment. And that's one of the really interesting and beautiful things about street photography, is that you're reacting to what you see and just what happens in that moment. But you're always thinking about the subject, where they are in the frame, using the composition, thinking about, can I move an inch this way and bring that line in to lead them in? But again, these decisions are happening really, really quickly. Okay, the point number 3 is to try to capture life as naturally as possible. Street photography is about capturing natural life. We're not posing anything. We're not setting anything up. And of course, that has its own challenges when we're doing that. It means that we can't predict what is going to happen. But the main aim is that we're capturing those natural moments that can't be predicted, because when you're able to capture those are what make photos even more special. When you're able to capture those moments that nobody's really reacting to your camera, you've probably heard me talk about becoming a fly on the wall, where you're almost invisible as a photographer. That's really what we're aiming to do. And street photography is really at the heart of it, is about trying to capture those natural moments and trying to be inconspicuous, not having people react to you as a photographer. That is one of the main goals of street photography. Okay, point 4, like I mentioned just before, light, fundamental to all aspects of photography, and street photography is no exception. Light is another element that you can use creatively when you're doing street photography, because adding great light or shooting during the times of the day where the light is really good will always elevate your images. So getting out there, shooting during the best times of the day, golden hours, blue hours, even at nighttime, these can all provide fantastic lighting conditions. And thinking about how you use light can really transform your street photographs. So if you can, as always, get out there in the times of the day that are giving you the best light, and also play with the light, experiment with the light, try different things, shoot into the sun, play with those shadows, maybe underexposed to throw the shadows into darkness, like in this image that I took in. This was in Venice, in Italy. You could see that I was shooting at sunset. I've got the silhouette of the man. I've underexposed a little bit to throw those shadows. And then I've got a little bit lucky with that fleeting moment of the bird passing overhead. So all of these different little elements kind of come into this kind of nice little moment. And then this image, it was taken in Tibet. And I wanted to share this image with you. It's one of my favorite images, and it's a really good example of one of the themes that I've talked about with some of you before about street photography, about thinking about the view through your camera as a stage and thinking about people walking in and out of the scene. And I like to do this a lot when I find an interesting background, an interesting scene that I think maybe has great color, like this image, or great lines, or really interesting compositional potential, again, like this scene. Now, in this situation, I was walking through this monastery and I just found this beautiful scene with the walls, the colors. But imagine there's no monk there. That's what I saw. So I knew that this was a great scene. And I knew that if I just stood there, framed and composed the image, all I had to do was wait for someone interesting to walk into that gap in the middle. And so I didn't know who was going to walk into the frame. And if I look at my edit, there's actually quite a lot of images of tourists walking past, maybe couples. But one of the images that I got was this one. And I knew as soon as I took it that I got the image that I wanted, because of the fact that the monk in his red robes matched the red walls. And it was just a perfect moment. And he was absolutely the perfect subject that could have walked into that frame. But again, it's completely natural, completely unscripted, unposed. But it's a case of, for this, many of you know I love talking about composition and finding these great scenes. A lot of the time, what you can do is just keep your eyes open for a great scene, a great backdrop, compose the photo first, and then wait for those people to fall into those kind of perfect places within the frame. And that can often make a great street photograph. So a few key things to take away and that really important for street photography. Remember, number one, be patient and expect a lot of misses, because street photography requires a lot of patience. You're often going to be out there for hours shooting, looking for moments, looking for interesting backdrops, looking for interesting situations. And you are going to get a lot of misses because of the nature of street photography, where everything is changing. You can't control anything. You are going to get a lot of bad photos, basically. But that's okay, because if you keep going and you keep persisting and trusting in the process, you will eventually get a quote unquote a hit, or an image that really works for you and that you're trying to capture from that situation. So the key is not to give up with this type of photography, and is to keep going, because just the very nature of street photography requires you to just keep going, be patient, and trust in the process that you will eventually get an image that you're happy with. And sometimes you might only get one image from, hours and hours of shooting, but when you get that image, that can make your day. Okay, before we get on to your photos, has anybody got any questions from what I've just been talking about there? I mean, who would describe themselves as a street photographer? John, I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
And then I'd put Francis as a second place. And then maybe Dante and Anne would be tied for third and fourth. John, what are your experiences? I mean, we've talked about your experiences in South Korea and the restrictions there, but how did you get into street photography? And what are your favorite things about street photography?
Well, I used to live in New York. I think New York, I spent most most of my life in New York City.
Hmm.
So that's how I became uh, interested in street photography because um, it's a it's a great city and very photographer friendly city, and there's a there's a lot of like a museum of modern art. There's a international photography center.
Hmm.
There's a lot of photography schools and museums and institutions that supports photography, and photography is basically welcome there, and people expect to be photographed if you're out in public, and it's
Mm.
become a normal life. So it's a great place to uh, practice street photography. So that's where I yeah began to learn.
And what's your favorite thing about street photography? I mean, how does it make you feel? Because some photographers are terrified about doing street photography. Some
Oh, I
people are
mean,
kind of
yeah,
scared of interacting with strangers, maybe getting seen by somebody, and that
or
that fear,
confrontation. Yeah,
confrontation sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep. That, I mean, that's always the case. Um, some places more severe than others, but that's also part of life. That's also part of the documentation. And being a street photography, yeah, you're at basically. I look at myself as documentary
Hmm.
photographer. I really like to document these moments. A lot of the times, just because I don't have very good memory, so I like to remember things. Right? I like to look back, and to me, you know, a good photograph taken from a street. If I can look back at that photo, and if I can hear the sound or even smell
Mm.
something from that scene, to me that's a good photo. It means, oh yeah, by by having this photo, I could go back and remember that moment. So that's kind of my thinking process.
But when you're out shooting, I've
Yeah,
looked at a lot of your photography. You must be out there walking around for hours and
yeah,
hours. What keeps you going? Is it that search for the just getting that one photo, that one
yeah,
great photo from
yeah,
the day? Is that what motivates you?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I told you, a lot of the times I'm lucky if I can get one or two, okay photo, not even good one. But it's just it's kind of like I used to play golf. You play like really bad 17 holes, but if you have one one birdie or one eagle on one hole, it's good enough to make you want to go back. So I think it's similar. Yeah, when you have something good, and if you're happy, you just want to keep go back and do it again. But even if it's not not that great, to me it's just I kind of enjoy the process, just documenting life,
Mm.
uh, documenting things the way I see it and the way I felt. So I try to capture the way I felt that moment, not like
Mhm.
the way it should look. Or so I kind of try to leave an impression that this is how I felt at that moment. And to me, personally, to me, it's documentation for myself. Yeah, when I cannot remember things, I could always go back and look back at the photos and say, "Oh yeah, I remember that," and brings back all the happy memories, pleasant memories. Yeah,
That's
that's
really interesting.
yeah,
And so you don't think about the ones like if you shot, you spent all day shooting and you didn't get any images, but then, right before you're about to go home
yeah,
and give up, you got that one image. And
yeah,
that was the one from the day. And then you kind of forget about all those hours that you put in, not getting lucky in the shots. But if you get that one image, there's that. I don't know about you, but I personally feel very, I take it maybe have a look on the back of the camera and think, I think I've got something here. I'm pretty sure I've got an image here. And then you can't wait to get back to the computer, get it up on the screen.
Yeah.
And when you see it and you're like, I've got something here. This is something I'm proud of.
Yeah.
That's a very, personally, I get kind of butterflies when I think I've got an image, and then you see it and you're like, I got it. And it, like you said, it makes the whole day and effort worthwhile.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes even if I don't get anything, a lot of the times I would spend more than 1 hour, 2 hours in one spot. Just frame the shot first, and you think, something could happen here. This has potential. You stand there for hours and take 30, 40, 50 shots, but then eventually you say, okay, that's enough. Nothing's going to happen today. When that happens, I tend to go back to the same spot. But if I do that 2-3 times and still nothing is happening, then it's time for me to move on. Yeah.
That's really interesting to hear you say that, because that's one of the things that stuck with me very early on in my career. I took a workshop with some National Geographic photographers, and they told me about that concept of going back to the same place. If you find, a good scene, a good angle that you think has potential for a photo, go back again and again. And they told me that they would like hang out on the same street corner all day, or go back the next day if they didn't get it. And I was just like, oh, that's how they get these shots. That's just so determined.
Yeah.
They smell an image. It's there somewhere.
Yeah.
They just need to wait and wait until they get it. And that was quite a revelation for me early in my career. And I think it's useful for people to know as well, because again, that's a transferable skill into other types of photography. That sense of, if you find yourself in a situation where you want to photograph, perhaps you're there at the wrong time of day, where nothing's happening. You're not going to get it. Perhaps you do need to wait. Perhaps you do need to come back and wait for something else. I think Dante and I have talked about this and some of the scenes that he's photographed for his recent magazine, where the weather conditions in the Philippines were terrible the day that he went to photograph. But he had to go back again and again and just be patient until the conditions were just right for the image that he wanted to take.
Yeah. I think a lot of there's similarities between street photography and nature photography. So nature photography is basically street photography with nature and animals, right? Yeah.
That's one way to look at it. Yeah, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, and animals are as unpredictable as humans, so you just have to go back and wait. I mean, I see a lot of the National Geographic documentary, and these photographers just spend months, up in the mountain, just
exactly
hiding in the bushes, and that's kind of crazy.